Today is January 8th. It is a Sunday, the year of our Lord 2023. And we are here to talk about times that were not 2023, but prior. This is about Tartaria. For those of you who are new to this process, Tartaria was here. We're going to talk about what that means. I get a lot of grief for some of the things that I think might be true. And I'll tell you that I'm reading history here as it is written by the guy. This text is up on the. Go read the whole thing yourself. It's like 500 pages. Come up with your own conclusion. I'll put you on the show. It took you a minute to understand what Tartaria was really all about, Brandy. How did you wake up to this? What was the big aha moment for you where you said, holy crap, Gandalf might not be full of shit?
Well, um, I woke up to Tartaria when someone told me that I knew too much about computers, and that I must have been from a different place and time, and that was Tartaria.
Yeah. Well, I think that, we're into the soul, the circle of, or the wheel of time and the well of souls here. That's a different show. We need to put that show down and get it done right. Okay, so the Tartarian culture was here. It's what we're going to present here, and I'll tell you that I believe some of this. I believe none of this. I believe all of this. I am here for people to make their own decisions. That's every platform that we're setting up. It's all the moves that we've made have been around giving people information so they can make their own critical decision making, and critical thinking. So what do you see in front of me here, Brandy?
A whole bunch of pictures of Genghis Khan. Oh my gosh, I asked about that a while back. Yes, the Khan family, right?
So the Khan was the leader from a military standpoint of European Tartaria. And you'll see there are multiple Khans here. We've got these Grand Tamerlan Batu Han, which is a previous to Khan. He's supposed to be here 1222 to 1502. The Khan has lost his K, right? But he looks very Arab. There's a reason so much conflict is in the Middle East and all of the wealth transfer. One of the greatest wealth transfers we've ever had. I don't know if COVID's beat this or not. Prior, it was the 70s oil crisis. The shame is that oil is free flowing like water. Okay, do you think the guy might be a giant? By the way,
I would think it is.
Grand Sultan Ahmed the third, Emperor Day something. That's in French probably. Then you're going to say, "Oh, that's a pygmy." Whatever. Even if he's a pygmy, I mean, I'm very close to 7 feet tall, and I bet you that guy's taller than me. Look at this thing in his hand. We see this in the Egyptian lore sets.
Right.
And so this is a free energy environment. Wait till you see how the women dress. Oh my gosh. Talk about the dress shop that cost $1 billion. I bet you this is a monoatomically laced gold. Probably came from Califia. The only thing on Muskeria or California as an island when it was filled with Griffin writing Califia led women was that they actually had just like we can weave silver into a bed cover and plug it into the wall in our current tech set. This gold was monoatomic. It was harmonizing. Look at the headsets that they're wearing. Even the men are wearing this garb that this is supposed to be some sort of armor. Well, this guy's got a sword. That doesn't look like a chainmail to me. It's a different type of tech. We have regions and areas with different leaders. And then we get to the women. This building behind her is a white quartz building. This would have been a very large part of the free energy environment. As with this, look at the inside of this building. We've talked about this.
Yes, it looks exactly like one of our castles that we did the video on, abandoned castles. I mean,
Yeah, I
doesn't
think we have
that
two parts to that actually.
designate? Yes, there is.
So look, this is American Indian. We're seeing dream catchers, and way pre LBGTQ. We have what appears to be a rainbow set here, end to end. I can see two of those colors, so I assume the rest of them are in between. Uh, Look at this one. You're going to got to go in the Alps and up into the big part of the Pyrenees to see this type of Indian culture. What the heck is on her head? That looks like an amplifier of some sort, doesn't it?
Right. It
Same kind of thing here.
kind of
Sacred.
has like that look of Mardi Gras in New Orleans as well.
Oh wow! I didn't think about that. You're exactly right. That's an excellent observation. So look at this. These are the elongated heads that we see. This looks like the top of a building in a power generating set. Very Russian, and that's Russian for a reason. So look at these. Look at the get-ups. I mean, she's holding what is a different version of an Omer, by the way. That's supposed to represent a threshed set, and this is amazing stuff. Look at the sacred geometry in these headsets.
Right. The one in the bottom, in the middle, is just so lacy, crocheted looking garment.
I bet you these are resonant frequency chords. I got to step away from some tech. Talk about this for a minute. Look at the similarities in the use of stones, all within sacred geometry layouts.
Right. I mean, it's like each one of these has the train or some kind of attached garment that gives them royalty status. It's part of their costume so that anyone looking at them can say, oh, whoa, they're important, they're elite, they're special. Um, they wore it, the bottom right picture where she's in white and gold, and the one on the left, she has the train of some sort, outer garment that's in a very deep blue with silver trimming. Um, all of these are, I mean, even the dress themselves
Yep.
uh,
Everything is
are
of pattern
elite.
and frequency. It's very ornate. And I mean, this
Yes,
look at that. The headdresses here. All of these are some sort of amplification device based on what we've seen. We saw that rock that went over the guy's head in that one video we saw. You remember the
correct.
infrared rocks that we looked at? This is very
Hmm.
much a symbolic of that. So is this. It's very much the same shape. So we're looking at the same set here. So this is leadership in Tartaria. This is what we just went through here. You want to know who was
The first
responsible?
natives of America is the article you just passed
Oh, hold
over.
on. We're about to get there. So that this is the European and Russian China. This is where we are. But now we're going to get into the real part of the big lie here. The slave trade that we were told about did not go from east to west. It went from west to east. This is going to be
Right.
interesting information. You talk about censorship and Black Lives Matter. You had no idea. The first Native Americans of America, and I'm reading from Tartaria and the Erased Civilization. It's a PDF. It's available on the library on locals. Go read the stuff yourself. You can order it. The guy who wrote it is one of my favorite authors. I've read a bunch of his stuff. He does excellent research. This is part of his research. This guy was part of waking me up. Before I got to his text, I really didn't have any understanding about where I was trying to go with my knowledge path. So, the first Native Americans of America, they're the Black Moors. The author and Christian historian Chancellor Williams, who wrote the original Moors, like the original Egyptians, were Black Africans. The 16th century English playwright William Shakespeare uses the word Moor as a synonym for African. His contemporary Christopher Marlowe also used African and Moor interchangeably. Black soldiers, specifically identified as Moors, were actively recruited by Rome, served in Britain, France, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. Saint Maurice, who's the patron saint of medieval Europe, was the only one of many black soldiers and officers under the employ of the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire is the cover for Tartary. It's how they explain all the architecture and everything else. So, although generations of Spanish rulers have tried to expunge this era from historical records, recent archaeology and scholarship now sheds fresh light on the Moors who flourished in the Al-Andalus for more than 700 years, from 711 AD until 1492. The Moorish advances in mathematics, astronomy, art, and agriculture helped propel Europe out of the Dark Ages and into the Renaissance. The Moors brought enormous learning to Spain that over centuries would percolate to the rest of Europe. The intellectual achievements of the Moors in Spain had a lasting effect. Education was universal in Moorish Spain, while in Christian Europe, 99% of the population was illiterate, and even kings could neither read nor write. At a time when Europe had only 2 universities, the Moors had 17, located in Almeria, Cordoba, Granada, Jaén, Malaga, Seville, and Toledo. And in the 11th and 12th centuries, public libraries in Europe were non existent, while Moorish Spain could boast more than 70, including one in the Cordoba that housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Universities in Paris and Oxford were established after visits by scholars to Moorish Spain. It was this system of education taken to Europe by the Moors that seeded European Renaissance and brought the contingent out of 1,000 years of intellectual and technological gloom of the Middle Ages. Playing a game of chess. Looks like they're debating which move and how to get from here to there.
Wow, that is.
I don't know who's playing black, but they're winning. Rook to king. Yeah, I can win from there. Okay, so destroying the identity of the Black Moor Tartarians. The Los Angeles Times wrote in June 4, 1990, they reported that when Napoleon visited the Sphinx in 1798, everything but the head was buried in sand, and his soldiers reputedly used the Sphinx for target practice. While the Sphinx had already suffered nose damage prior to Napoleon, the greatest destruction took place during Napoleon's occupation of Egypt. As documented by Tony Browder and testified by the collection of Sphinx portraits he has assembled in 225 pages of his book, The Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. These 6 portraits were drawn over a period of 100 years, from 1698 to 1798, are the only current evidence available which shows the progression of the nose destruction. Besides the Sphinx, a large percentage of Africoid Kemite statues are missing their noses, whereas European-looking figures are intact. Faces of Africoid sculptures were also altered to appear Caucasoid by Kemit's European conquerors. A Sphinx statue on display in the British Museum admits that the face of the statue was reworked. During the Roman occupation of Egypt, reporting on the riddle of the racial identity of the ancient Egyptians, Count C. Volney, a distinguished French scholar who visited Egypt in the late 1700s, he wrote with astonishment, "When I visited the Sphinx, its appearance gave me the key to the riddle, beholding the head, typically Negro, and all its features." He later added, "The Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. The NWO Romanov dynasties would often deface statues of past monarchs in order to erase or diminish their legacy. In these cases, the removal of the nose would be accompanied by other more extensive facial disfigurements, as well as the destruction of inscriptions and symbols of office." This is the examples of defacement. So they're defacing the memory and legacy. So the story goes, some 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homes, forced aboard slave ships that were destined for the New World, and about 10.7 million people survived the horror of the Middle Passage between 1526 and 1866, only to end up in bondage on sugar, rice, cotton, and tobacco plantations throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. The transatlantic slave trade is the largest forced migration in history. Black people are indigenous to the Americas. Black Native Americans are not a result of the so-called Red Indian mixing with slaves. The so-called Red Indian comes from the mixing with the European colonists and the Asians that were in America before Columbus. The first Native Americans were Mongolian Tartarians. Melville Herskovitz, a European anthropologist, was one of the originators of the out of Africa theory. Herskovitz never had any historical, archaeological, or anthropological proof that Black people in the Americas are ever derived from West and North Africa. Consequently, Herskovitz, you okay over there, Brandy?
Yeah, you might need to mute me for a few minutes.
It's okay. It sounds like they're having fun. Consequently, Herskovitz crafted a theory that Blacks arrived in America for the transatlantic slave trade, which allegedly brought in more than 10 million African slaves. According to the National Archives of Spain and the Smithsonian, the records there was no evidence to prove 70,000 ships with black Africans ever sailed the Americas. 70,000 ships. Melville carried out the teachings of his mentor Franz Boas of the Americas inferior and the European presence superior. Before this time, blacks came from Africa through the transatlantic slave trade story never existed. Hear that again. Blacks coming from Africa through the transatlantic slave trade story never existed prior to that guy. As a result, Melville's work has been fragmented and used as propaganda by writers like Harold Corlander and Alex Haley, which further perpetuated the myth of transatlantic slave trade through the hit movie routes. Americans were black people. They were not brought here on ships. Instead, they were enslaved right here in their own lands. They were brought on ships. The numbers are extremely exaggerated. It was published that 15 million to 20 million slaves arrived in the Americas between 1540 and 1850, over a 310-year period, according to the U.S. history books. The Stewart synopsis points out a few questions that should be examined. Number one, over a period of 300 years, is it fair to say that 60,000 slaves were transported annually to the Americas, or has the transportation of slaves to the Americas been one big myth? Number two, the largest seagoing vessel carried 400 slaves, but not all ships were that large. Time of passage was 3 to 4 months. That means 200 vessel ships per year would have to travel carrying 300 people. One ship could make 3 passages a year. The transatlantic slave trade database says there were 1,100 to 1,400 voyages made over that specific 300-year period. If that's the case, and each ship carried 400 people, the total number would be 560,000 Africans. That still didn't add up. We already know that over 83% of all Americans with African ancestry have Native American blood. 83% of all Americans with African ancestry have Native American blood. Did Native American tribes help slaves escape, or were Americans with African ancestry already part of Native American nations? After 20 years, the Royal Adventurer, with its 15 ships, had transported between 90,000 and 100,000 slaves. That is a long way from 15 million to 20 million slaves who were supposedly brought to the Americas. Doesn't that leave a little over 14 million to 19 million people not accounted for? What is up with that? Or was the black-brown birth rate that more accelerated than the white birth rate? The calculated median of 15 and 20 million would be 17.5 million. Divided by 400 people, the largest slave vessel, it comes out to 43,750 trips. Can you show me a record where this many trips occurred, or the number of trips calculated by the so-called experts? The figures exist of 27,000 to 35,000 voyages. The same thing happened with the Holocaust in Germany during World War II. 6 million people were supposedly killed, but there are not that many names referenced who died, totaling 6 million. In fact, the official story has reduced the number to under 1 million people. The Stewart synopsis lists these black native tribes: the Washita of the Louisiana and Midwest, the Yamasee of the Southeast, the Iroquois, the Cherokee Indians, the Blackfoot Indians, the Pequot and the Mohegans of Connecticut, the Black Californians, the Califians. The Cal in California literally means black, after the name of the great Mama Cali, or Queen Califia. The Olmecs of Mexico, the Darionite of Panama. 4.25 million African slaves shipped to Brazil and Mexico. The story goes, over the course of 300 years, from 16th to 19th centuries, the Brazil imported around 4 million slaves, some 40% of the total transatlantic slave trade. The overwhelming majority come from the former Portuguese colony of Angola, located on the Atlantic coast of southern Africa. The July 9, the United Nations Educational, Science and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, named Valongo Wharf a World Heritage Site, along with the Northwest England's Lake District, the walled city of Babadad in India, and the sacred Japanese island of Okinoshima, which doesn't allow women on its shores. Apparently, Califia vacation there. Of the new sites on the list, Parker passed in the Valongo Wharf, built in 1811. The wharf functioned as South Africa's leading slave port. Here's that as many as 900,000 enslaved African men, women, and Brazilian and children were led before being sold on the Brazilian slave market. Those who didn't survive the ordeal, they died during the transatlantic journey or sometime after arriving at the wharf. They were buried in mass. Mexico claims African slaves as well. A total of 186,766 Africans were imported into Mexico during the 300 years accounted for the Spanish slave trade. Looking at the appearance of modern Mexicans, it becomes clear that the NOW, the New World Order, no, that's NWO, just made up the numbers. That I think it's supposed to be NWO. They just made up the numbers without any proof or evidence or the veracity of these claims. There's no way 186,000, 766,000 black people, the black skinned Mongols, could be responsible for the pigmented side of well over 100 million people, light and dark skinned mestizos. The American Negro or Indian or Black Moor or Mongolian Tartarian is the oldest man on earth. The American Negro or Indian or Black Moor or Mongolian Tartarian is the oldest man on earth. Explains a lot, doesn't it? The oldest chromosome on Earth was found in a man from South Carolina and is unrelated to the African languages. There are more pyramids in the Americas than anywhere else. The Maya or G, as in Mexico, conquered the Nile Valley, Arabia, Afghanistan, India, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The statues of Buddha are simply the images of Osiris the ruler who conquered the known world in a remote epoch of human history. There are many sources of the Old Testament that take place in the Americas. Mexico is the original land of the American Nero, who is Olmec, Xiaxtec, etc. In North America, he is Algonquin, Choctaw, Washita, Peacock, Pico, Wampanoag, Lenni, Lenape, Iroquois, etc. The Spanish and Portuguese captured and sold what they called Negro de Terra into the European slave markets. The Dutch and English didn't even enter Africa until the 1700s, yet slavery started in 1492. The Columbus was a Portuguese Moor named Salvator Fernando Zarco, and many of the European monarchs in Europe were also Negroes who came to America as they were being pushed out of Europe by white European Catholics. That's going to be the Jesuits and the early Catholic Church starting in about 265. The conquistadors were sent to the West Indies to destroy the kingdoms of the blacks and reduce them to servitude and slavery. It was known as the Dum Diversas, the doctrine of discovery, and the Inquisition, and gave the Catholic kingdoms the rights of murder, rape, enslavement, and torture, all those not under the authority of the Vatican or the Pope. So you either succumb to early Jesuits or you get tortured, enslaved, raped, or murdered.
I would comment, but I better shut up.
I think it is best said to reflect the text. We're trying to stay on YouTube. America
Yeah.
is the Old World, and Columbus called his first voyage the last crusade to conquer the holy lands of Mexico and Peru, which means Perjero or House of Heru or Jerusalem, which becomes Jerusalem. It is also known as the navel of the world. Tehuacán means city, or Tehutu or Toth, or Tenochtitlan, which became Mexico City, means city of Enoch.
Wow.
Mexico is named for Moses, or Mexi like Moshe. The Old Testament contains volcanoes, corn, bears, tobacco, all which are native to America. Utah is Judah and contains the city of Moab. Oh, where is Sheepdog? The Great Salt Lake is the Dead Sea. There are more pyramids and the megalithic structures in the Americas than anywhere else, including the Nile Valley. The New World Order tells the story backwards. The Negroes, the Indian or copper-colored indigenous people of the Americas, who is actually a redskin. Many think black people are black. Yet there are many shades of copper, which is the color of the earth. You look in the old dictionaries, you will see that nigger and Indian were synonymous, and that the colored is simply short for copper or colored. Why do you think they keep changing your titles from India to Negro to colored, African American? The Black Moor Negro is the most copied man on earth. Got any feedback, Brandy?
Wow. Yeah, a little bit. When I was told uh, about 4 months ago, maybe 5, that everything we learned in history, we had to mirror everything. And sometimes we had to do the mirror and turn it upside down. So we are going to find out so many things that we thought were true that are not going to be true at all. And someone predicted that in my life a long time ago.
I know who
I
that would have been. Okay, so the narrative that we're drawing here is that an upside down world it started a long time ago, and that the black people, the oppressed, the 13% of our society, that is 50% of everyone you see on television, right?
right.
That the taking of our masculine and feminine power stations, it all weaves together to hide this.
They didn't want us to know.
They can't let us know. Okay,
Because,
here we go.
if they let us know, then we figure out what they're up to. That can't happen when they're
Then we come
struggling.
together and we figure out what they're truly the tyranny that we've been under. And then lights out. They can't take us all out. And then we're not tyrannized. We're not doing their bidding. Okay, the Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztecs, they're all black Moors. Look at the nose, and then go look at all the way up to the Easter Island statues, right? Most most historians, anthropologists, and scholars refer to the Olmecs as the mother culture or the pre-Hispanic Mexico. The presence of the Olmecs predates the Mayan civilization by more than 1,500 years, and the Aztecs in Mexico by as many as 2,500 years, which would indeed make it the oldest pre-Columbian civilized society in Mesoamerica. Emerging from the jungles of Mexico's southernmost Gulf Coast, the Olmec influence spread through Central America and manifested itself in art, architecture, religious rituals, everywhere. There is enough evidence from the architectural digs to support the idea that the Olmec civilization possessed several of the characteristics of a civilization, a social structure, a political structure, an economic structure, religion, art. The Tolan of Aztec mythology was renowned for its sumptuous palaces and awe-inspiring buildings made from gold, jade, turquoise, and quetzal feathers. The city was also thought to have been flooded with wealth generated by the gifted Toltec craftsmen, highly skilled in metallurgy and pottery. So much so that their potters were said to have taught the clay to lie, according to Coe, published in 156. And later, Aztec metal workers and jewelers were even known as Tolteca. The Toltecs were also credited with mastering nature, producing huge maize crops and natural colored cotton of red, yellow, green, and blue. Unsurprisingly, following centuries of looting, no artifacts. We see if we go get Linda. No artifacts. Uh, Unsurprisingly, centuries of looting, no artifacts survive to attest this material wealth, except, will you please call Sassy? Uh,
Yes.
Unsurprisingly, following centuries of looting, no artifacts survive to attest this material wealth, except indications that the Toltecs do a major trade in obsidian used for blades and arrowheads, which was mined from nearby Pachuca. The Olmec colossal heads are stone representations of human heads sculpted from large basalt boulders. They range in height from 1.17 to 3.4 meters or 3.8 to 11.2 feet. They weigh between 6 and 50 tons. The heads are a distinctive feature of the Olmec civilization of ancient Mesoamerica. All portray mature individuals with fleshy cheeks, flat noses, and slightly crossed eyes. Their physical characteristics correspond to a type that is still common among the inhabitants of Tabasco and Veracruz. The backs of the monuments often are flat. The boulders were brought from Sierra de las Tuctas mountains of Veracruz, given that the extremely large slabs of stone used in their production were transported over large distances of 150 kilometers, 93 miles, using a horse and buggy. That the monuments represent portraits of powerful individuals, Olmec rulers. Each of the known examples has a distinctive headdress. The heads were variously arranged in lines or groups at major Olmec centers, but the method and logistics used to transport the stones to these sites remains unclear. They all display distinctive headgear, and one theory is that these were worn as protective helmets, maybe worn for war or to take part in a ceremonial Mesoamerican ball game. The last great Mesoamerican cultures were the Aztecs. Uh, they were a Nahuatl speaking people who, in the 15th and early 16th centuries, ruled a large empire in what is now central and southern Mexico. The Aztecs are also called from the word Aztlan, or white land, an allusion to their place of origin, possibly in northern Mexico. They were also called Tenochca, from a mythical ancestor, Tenoch or Mexica, or in the Mexica, probably from Metzalapan, or Moon Lake, the mystical name for Lake Texcoco, from Tenochca. It was derived of the name of their great city, Tenochtitlan, or and from Mexica, and from the name for the city that succeeded in the Aztec capital and the surrounding valley. And this name was applied later to the whole Mexican nation. Check out the Tartarian Dome in this image down here to the left. These are supposed to be guys that are savages, but yet they're standing in front of what is obviously Tartarian architecture. This is a choice to live in one in harmony with the world, not to go out and not use this technology at all. The influence of the Toltec civilization in Mexico can be seen as far away as the Yucatan, specifically at the sites of Chichen Itza and Mayapan in the former set of ruins. We also see the Atlantean figures at the Temple of the Warriors, but they're smaller in scale compared to the ones found in Tula. The archaeologists have debated for years about whether or not the sites identified as Toltec in the faraway Yucatan were just copying Tula. They were colonies of the city or were conquered by it. All can agree and plainly see the strong influence coming from the Toltecs, including the smaller Atlanteans. Whether a trading empire, or an influential kingdom state, or cultural movement, the Toltec civilization ended up with the fall of Tula to outside northern invaders sometime in the 12th century. Most of the living quarters around the ceremonial center were abandoned like 1150 AD. There's no evidence of a huge fire sweeping through the city. There is evidence of a huge fire sweeping through the city about that time. That's the same way they got rid of San Francisco, right? Mexico's second president and first and only black president, Vicente Guerrero, from 10th August 1782 to 14th February 1831. It's pretty good reign there, 50 years. He was a major military leader during Mexico's War for Independence, and as president, ended slavery in his nation in September 15th of 1829. This guy looks like just a regular old black guy. He doesn't look like a Mexican guy. They're all the same. This is pictures from 1671, and obviously there's Tartarian architecture in the back of what's happening here. So in the 1900s, look at the hats. We're going to go back to talking about core Tartarians here. This early in the 1900s, you remember we have a bunch of fires. 1903 to 1906 is not very good at all. A turn of a century. Lots of earthquakes and fires and floods, and California getting pounded. The Tartarians were natty dressers and haberdashers. Even outings to the beach included suits and hats. Everyone wore hats, even the children, a far cry from the sweatsuit crowd of today. Everybody gets a hat. Hat tells you where your station is in life. Look at the hats. Everybody gets a hat. This tells you where you come from and where you are in the pecking order of society. You can always tell by the hat. Even today, are you a white hat? Are you a black hat? Are you a red pill? Are you blue? And look at this. These people have on hats of power and prestige. This guy is a local administration guy. I've got bowlers. These were usually physical laborers. And this is a hat of aristocracy. She's obviously the lady of the house. And this would be her mistress or her mother in waiting, also taking care of the kids. Looks like there's a lot of children around. Look at the similarities in the way that we see this social structure. I've got people that are of the same grouping, same hats. Always follow the hats. Okay. That concludes our spot on Tartaria and what this looks like. But this is the beach in Portland. There's nobody out here wearing nothing. And these people out here in suits actually have like half body type of suits. Look at the background of this picture here. These are white courts, I would assume. And these kids don't look like they're starving or having any issues. They look well fed and taken care of. This is a thriving part of our history, but yet we are lied to about it. This is our heritage. This is our heritage.
Absolutely amazing.
Did you see the hats down here? This is our guy this is the Californias. Remember that one map we saw where Louisiana came all the way over to like almost to San Francisco?
Exactly.
This is the beach of the 1900s. No boom boxes here. Everybody looks to be pretty much doing what they're supposed to. And this is actually a bathing suit this little girl has on. The modesty
Wow.
factor is completely different. Look at the hats and the way that these two distinctive family sets work out. So these are not slaves and slave owners, right? These are people who are in parity. So I've got a guy here with this kind of cowboy hat on. So the hats are about the station and where you are in the existence. Bowler hats, or these are going to be a stiffer, harder hat. These were mostly people that were
Yeah,
running
like the
universe.
third, the guy almost in the middle, the shorter one, his hat almost looks like an Irishman's hat.
So that's called a bowler. And that,
Okay.
and that, that and then the Irishmen were everybody's trying to transition into a new history. These people do not look oppressed and horrible slave owned. They're not wearing
Nope.
tatters. This is going to be the leader of the worker guys. Look at this hat back here. He's household administration. This guy's field work. Look at this guy over here. Same type of hat. He's in a position of authority. The women have
And
on these.
notice the guy with the white hat. He had to have been the guy at the top.
He is most likely the landowner, and
Yes.
just like over here, in this environment, this guy is probably landowner and leader. But in this environment, look, this hat at this specific tilt, right? You see the same type of thing. This is an ornate leadership hat, and look at her. She's dressed in lace. The white represents leadership. Yeah, those you're exactly right. This is going to be the mother in waiting, probably her mother or his mother, and she is going to be the wet nurse and the possibly depending on how old she is. A wet nurse was someone who was also she could also breastfeed. That's why they call them a wet nurse, the wetness of milk. So that and the same genetic line was often used for that, so that memory of genetic instance could be passed forward. It's part of what the breastfeeding ritual that's been taken from us is about. So Tartaria was black people, and we were them, and we were Russians. We don't get into the red shield in this presentation, but the red horde were the Russians, and we were American. This was all Russian. Look at this background. This is all Tartarian. Is that the Capitol building? No, it's not the Capitol building. But these kids don't look. Look at their hats. These are a distinct. Doesn't it look like the halo that's around Christ's picture in those old pictures around his head?
You're right.
Yep. So I don't know. Maybe they were being groomed and sold. I have no idea. They don't look like they're being terrorized. This looks like a pretty good time happening out here. I'm not sure where this is. Portland. Yep. So this is going to be up. Was that going to be up in the Great Lakes? No, that's the coastline.
Is
That
that
might be.
Oregon?
Yeah, it's Oregon. Yeah. So this is Tartaria. We started all the way up here and went through what this looks like from the fact that the slave trade was what was west to east, not east to west. That the defacement of history, so that the noses can be taken out because that was a distinctive feature. That the history itself, the transatlantic slave trade, does not add up mathematically. We're short 90% of the people. We got to 560,000 possible slaves based on the number of ships, the capacity of those ships, the sailing time for what was the East India Trading Company's path. It doesn't work. I'm short like 18 million people out of the up to 20 million that were supposed to be trafficked in this type of environment where they were like sardines. This is a defacement and a debasement, right? This is making people succumb. Tyranny. You want to talk about tyranny? This is tyranny. Spend 3 months in this environment. There's not enough room. There's not enough space. There's not enough ships. It doesn't work. The slave trade does not work mathematically. So where else did they go? They might have gone to Mexico. Wait, this is all the places that we're supposed to have done this. It went the other way. Slave trade was everywhere, and the black leaders who were Tartarian royalty leadership and men of standing in many ways, sovereign within the Tartarian nation, they were enslaved, and they looked like this. Is that Mike Tyson? So I mean, look, there's just, this is. Do these people look like slaves? A
Nope.
19th century Mexican tribe now practically extinct. These were supposed to be Aztecs. This looks like a couple from Chicago going out for dinner on clothing throwback night. And,
Yes.
look, it is what it is. Wait, let's embrace our heritage. Does this guy? Oh no, who's that? That's the Mexican president in 1782 to 1831. 50 years. We don't hear about that. So,
And the
no,
irony of the Mexicans with the Tartarian issues, why are Mexicans so short? Can we figure that one out?
it's Aztec and Mayan blood.
Okay, gotcha.
Aztec and Mayan blood. Okay, so
Yeah,
look, we'll go scrape something else up here, and maybe I got maybe one more left to me tonight. But
gotcha.
yeah, I like what we're doing here. You got any closing thoughts about Tartaria and the history that's been hidden from us?
Um, Only that there's definitely things going on that we have no clue were happening. You have to look at the buildings, and that would be a nice idea for our next show. Let's pull up a couple of churches that were more than
Oh,
likely
yeah.
called.
Let's work on that. Yeah. I like that idea. Okay, say goodnight, Grace.
Yeah. Good night, Gandalf. Good night, everyone.